This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, nononsenseforex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 154 is brought to us by Bybit. Maybe I wasn't clear last week. Let me tell you about the promotion going on right now that you still have plenty of time to sign up for. Simply by existing and being an active trader on Bybit, you are eligible to have your dreams come true and win a 100K funded account or a 50K funded account. Become a crypto prop trader overnight. They also have an F1 race ticket with hotel and flight included. Surprise Bitcoin, surprised ETH, USDT airdrops, all for simply signing up. And you can do this if you are new or already existing. So all my existing Bybit traders, go check your portal right now. Why would you pass up on this? Why would anybody pass up on this? Click the link in the show notes that takes you to my blog. Scroll down to the bottom of the blog, click my affiliate link, and get on board. Because I get it. Maybe you're just so overwhelmed by all the things going on Bybit at any given time, because as everybody knows at this point, with Bybit, membership has its rewards. It is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and we had some big news in the crypto world recently. It wasn't earth-shattering like it was before, but the implications going forward are tremendous, contrarians. And we not only need to talk about it, but we need to do a little bit of forecasting going forward to see if we can get ahead of the next spot crypto ETF in the United States. Because for God's sakes, why wouldn't you? It's free money coming in that probably wasn't coming in before, and lots of it. We've already seen how over and above expectations, the success of the Bitcoin ETFs were. And we saw what that did for Bitcoin. And the following ETFs that will be approved in the future will probably not be as big as Bitcoin's were, safe to say, but the market caps are also a lot smaller. So any impact is going to be quite impactful, not just right away, but in the future, down the line, the things that we really focus on here. So if you weren't paying attention, the spot Ether ETF in the United States was approved recently. And a few things to note on that, just so you know, it still needs amending, which it will probably do. Don't expect this thing to come out for another probably 2 or 3 months right around then. It really depends on how long they take to amend and screw with it. There will be no staking or airdrop aspect of it, which is, especially the staking end of it, is one of the main reasons to invest in Ethereum in the first place. So if you're even a little bit crypto savvy, this is not going to be for you, because you're not getting really any of the additional advantages of holding it. But just because us dweebs wouldn't be interested in it, don't discount just how big this is for the future of Ethereum and really the crypto market in general, because it just continues to add legitimacy to this space, where before there wasn't a whole lot. A lot of the naysayers who were on the sidelines said, okay, well, we don't think the Bitcoin ETFs are going to get approved, and then they did, and they're like, well, that's just Bitcoin. It's very singular onto itself. As far as the blockchain companies and things like that, I don't see that happening. And boom, here we go. We already have everything kicked off with this Ether ETF, and Gary Gensler just out of nowhere came in and approved it. Who saw that coming? Not even a year ago, we're having this big debate of whether ETH was a security or not, because if it was, say goodbye to any kind of real future on the U.S. TradFi market for ETH, and probably the entire rest of the crypto market, as long as that was going to be the case. But why the sudden turn, Gary? I think it's pretty obvious. It's not like he just woke up and had an epiphany. He doesn't do that. What really happened, if it wasn't obvious, is he got a call from the people who really pull the strings in this world, the people who trash-talked most of crypto, not because they don't like it. They fully understand the potential of this market. They understand what we've been saying for the longest time. This is the future of money, and this is the future of computing. They know. They're not stupid. They just played stupid, and they're like, okay, now that we see an opening, now that we can actually have some measure of control over this, It's time to go ahead and get this thing kicked off. Gary, you know what you need to do. And like a good little boy, Gary complied. So this whole situation tells me a lot of things, a lot of very positive things. And I don't think people are really emphasizing this the way they should. This is so big for the future of our market contrarians. It probably won't even be contrarian for too much longer at this point. Not only does it bring legitimacy to the entire space, not only is it bringing a lot of money to the entire space and opening the door for institutions who have always wanted in to come in. Now, is the process going to be a bit slower for blockchain companies than it would Bitcoin, for example? Probably, yeah, but that doesn't matter. You have to start somewhere. You have to unlock the door before anybody can come in. And we have done that now with the ETFs we currently have in the United States and the ones which are now coming. So given how this process went down, and given how these institutions are not going to pass up on these huge opportunities for money to come flowing in, and they already know how big these opportunities are now because of the Bitcoin ETFs. Those things set absolute records. Why would they not seize the opportunity to create another ETF in the United States for a different token on the blockchain? It's just a matter of time at this point, right? How can it not be? Like, you think they're just going to stop here? They're going to see all the money that flows in, inflows that make all of their, or the majority of their other ETFs look laughably small and insignificant, and they're just going to stop at Ether. Is that what you're telling me? Hogwash. Poppycock, I say. It's coming, and I think it's pretty beneficial to try and get ahead of this, whether or not you own the token or not, or would like to own more of the token. Figuring out which crypto token is going to have the next spot ETF in the United States is going to be a really big deal. So let's get some chatter going and do this now. I say this a lot. Every podcast episode I shoot also goes to YouTube. So if you'd like to chime in and put a comment, that's where you're going to want to go. While you're there, since you're already there, give the podcast a like if you don't mind. It is probably the third or fourth largest platform I have for the podcast, but it's still important. And I will assume that everybody on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, for example, has already given this podcast a 5-star rating and reviewed it. Thank you for doing that, by the way. A lot of work and passion does go into this free podcast, believe it or not. And anything you can do in return is very, very much appreciated. But let's go ahead and get into some of the possibilities, what I think are probably the highest probabilities, at least, for the next spot crypto ETF in the United States. If you have a different answer, or if you simply want to agree with one of the ones that I bring up and say, okay, I think this one will probably be the next, shoot your shot, put it out there. Please do not take the token you're a fanboy of that's like in the 60s or 70s in market cap and act like that's going to be the next one. That's absurd. You're just shilling at that point. Don't do that. But I will give you what I think are the top 4 highest probabilities here and say a little bit about them, and then you can take it from there. So if I had to make a prediction right now, I would say the clear number 1 here is probably going to be Solana. It is the hot thing right now. It has a ton of money into it, and VC-backed money too. And in the TradFi world, that means something, because everybody in the TradFi world remembers the Silicon Valley boom. You could argue that's still happening right now. And when VC money comes in, it can be a bit of a gamble, but the good VC funds out there do a lot of research and have really good track records of choosing really good companies. And that means something in the TradFi world because that's that much research that they no longer have to do. It's almost like being pre-approved. The opposite of this would be something like Cardano, which is more backed by us, which is great. But in the TradFi world, they're not going to take that as seriously as these large VC firms coming in and placing their chips on something like Solana. So for the purpose of this show, I would absolutely have Solana number 1. And I've heard the narrative that this is almost like the advent of the tech boom. So for all of us like me who missed the tech boom, this is your chance to get in on version 2.0 of it. And if you're making correlations, some people will say Ethereum is similar to what we saw with AOL.com back in the day, to where something like Solana would be an improved continuation on that. So something like maybe Google, but potentially Yahoo as well. And people now would be like, LOL, why would I want to invest in Yahoo? Because I don't know if you were around back then, but Yahoo was gigantic and had a sick run and is still used today, 20, 25 years later, to where AOL is really not. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. But I see mostly tailwinds and very few headwinds for Solana in the scope of this conversation. Now we know, 1 year in crypto is worth, 5 or 10 in real life. So a lot could change between now and then. But, for the purpose of what we're talking about on this show, I would have Solana as a clear number one. Now, when I've heard others have these similar conversations and they mention Solana, almost everybody mentions XRP in the same conversation. So we should talk about that as well. So it's not that Solana is the narrative right now. And you could argue the XRP narrative is 1, maybe even 2 cycles ago. It's not about that. You guys know how I feel. I am a lot warmer on tokens from past cycles as long as they have taken that time to establish themselves and get by any roadblocks they need to get by. Like, you're going to give me a company that has taken time to establish themselves and become legitimate and get a lot of their mistakes out of the way at almost the same price as it was back when none of these things were true. I'm on board. We are XRP holders here on the 10-Minute Contrarian podcast. And if you look at what XRP does, it is very singular in what it does and still has a very high market cap. A lot of these holders have not left. They know what it can do. They know the potential it has. And none of this has changed. So I do think XRP belongs in the conversation. But one major problem, contrarians, XRP and Ripple, they're still on trial with the SEC. They're not going to make an ETF out of this anytime soon. And do you think after the trial's over, assuming everything goes well for them, that the SEC is just going to allow an ETF, 6 to 12 months later? I mean, I guess based on what I said at the top of the show, how it's really not up to them, it's up to the powers that be. It's certainly plausible, but there's no way I could have XRP ahead of Solana at this point if I'm putting my chips down. Now, another token, coin, I don't even know what you would call this one, that gets mentioned in this conversation sometimes. I'm not sure how serious they're being when they talk about it, but people do talk about the possibility of Dogecoin becoming the next spot ETF in the United States. And some people are saying it with a straight face. For the love of God, I hope this does not happen. I swear to God, dude, I will feel like the only adult in the entire room if something like this were to happen. TradFi is all about being serious and not losing money and investing in things that matter with real fundamentals behind it and things that are heavily regulated. Dogecoin is none of those things. Leave the dumb little kid stuff to the dumb little kids. I don't even want to spend any more time on this. But just know that this has been thrown around in the conversation by serious people, and I just don't know why. But again, as we know, if there's one thing I'm consistently wrong on, it is meme coins. So maybe factor that in too. I don't know, but I don't want to spend any more time talking about this. Let's do one more. And this one, oddly enough, has not been in the conversation much, but I don't think that's going to last too much longer. You guys know I'm a fanboy of this particular token, but somebody tell me why Chainlink is not in this conversation, but Doge is. With something like Chainlink, you're not jumping into a tribe almost like you are with some of these layer ones. Even though I guess, Chainlink technically is a layer one, but it is so unique onto itself in so many wonderful ways. We've spoken before on the show how it's kind of like the Intel of this new tech boom. How no matter who you are, if you are a blockchain, you are going to need them. Now, the counter argument might be, well, you have things like Pyth, Pyth, on the Solana blockchain, and some of these other layer ones attempt to have their own Oracle. Cardano has Charlie 3, all these things, but they still use Chainlink, and they will probably still always use Chainlink in some capacity. Again, TradFi people are more about, even when they take risk, they're still about lessened risk, and a lot more so than your average crypto investor is. So something like this makes a lot more sense than trying to put your chips down on who's going to be the next dominant layer one. Does it not? Why is Chainlink not in the conversation here? Maybe the current market cap is too low. I don't know. But either way, even if Chainlink is not the next one, I can certainly see it becoming one at some point in time. And again, we are predominantly buy and hold investors here. And so if this is a high probability, which I think it is, that is very exciting. If these ETFs continue to do well into the future, TradFi investors are going to get very excited about it. And they're going to say, okay, what's next? And tell me why it's next. And I think selling the Chainlink narrative is a very, very easy sell. It's the glue that holds everything together. So again, that is what I think would be the top 4 in terms of probabilities, whether I agree or like them or not. There they are. Feel free to expound on some of the ones I talked about or add your own, but you have to say why. That's the only caveat. Don't just hit and run. Now, in terms of when to expect these things to appear, again, we have no idea. I thought there was a tiny chance we would see the Ether ETF in 2024, but we're going to now. So as usual, we're not going to be able to time these things, but I will say a telltale sign you can look for in the United States is to see if any of these tokens start to trade on the CME futures market. Right now, it's just Bitcoin and Ether, as it's been for a while. But again, this is almost, like we talked about before with the VCs, this is almost kind of a pre-approval stage. There already has to be a lot of due diligence that takes place for a token to end up on the CME futures market. And other markets in the United States like that because that's less due diligence they have to do. So pay attention to any new tokens that might pop up there. And if it's a token you are interested in, or a token that you might want to add more to in the future, really, really take a look at this, because on the news, you might see something like a 5% or 10% pop in the price. But if appearing on the CME futures market is a precursor to a spot ETF in the United States, well, that's going to be worth a lot more than a 5 or 10% gain. So you might just want to ape into that thing even after the 5 or 10% pump and just sit back and be happy with it. Not financial advice. I would never suggest or advise you to ape into anything, but you see my point, right? If past is prologue and you see a 5 or 10% jump that should be a 2 or 300% jump, then I think you're getting a pretty good discount at a 5% pump. But if you're going to be a speculator, and really by definition, we all are here on the podcast, you don't want to be like most people and speculate with very little information or very little logic as to why you're investing your money in some of these projects. You can still speculate on very asymmetrical investments and have some very sound fundamental reasons for doing so. And that's where I really think the game is won long term. Because you're always going to get some right and get some wrong no matter what you do. But when you do things this way, you get a lot less wrong. And then you win by not losing. Because in contrarian land, the winners are huge. So just remember that going forward and pay attention to things like this. Because as time goes on and this market becomes more legitimate, everybody's going to see that we were not crazy. We were just early.